Okay, and as our next question, you kind of addressed a little bit, would you repeal the Carrillo Act?
I would be very supportive of a repeal of the Carrillo Act.
Should city and town councils ratify and negotiate teacher contracts instead of school committees?
Again, I think we're talking about the alignment of taxation as well as policy, and just to repeat my previous answer, I think those have to come from the same organization.
In your opinion, what are the keys to improving classroom instruction?
There are two big things for me that I think could be substantial reforms that we can make that would have a big impact. We saw in Central Falls with the very highly publicized firing of all the high school teachers. That was an exercise in leverage over adults arguing over some words on a piece of paper. Those teachers, to a large extent, were already doing what they were being asked to do formally. And I have it on good faith that they would have accepted that deal had they been allowed to vote on it in the first place. So we have a contract dispute that really went badly and ultimately negatively impacted not just the teachers but also the kids who were most supposed to protect. So for me, I believe that the whole nature of the contract that we have is a bit wrong. I would like to see a white-collar professional contract put in place for our teachers, because their mission is a white-collar professional job, to teach our children and teach them well. We shouldn't micromanage what a teacher is supposed to do in their job to teach our kids well, and that's one of the mistakes I think we make in our current contract. Our current contract is more like a blue-collar assembly line contract for the building of widgets as opposed for the teaching of our children. So I would be, as governor, I would undertake the responsibility to sit down with the union heads and hammer out a completely new contract that's based on the white-collar professional job of teaching our children. And if we can get that to happen, I think we begin to free up the teachers. And I've talked to a lot of teachers who are supportive of this idea because they agree that the nature of the contract that we have is wrong for the mission. Second to that, and this is of equal importance, is the fact that the Board of Regents has finally said that we should assess our teachers with a metric of 51% test scores. And I'm supportive of assessing teachers. I think it's crucially important, although as we talked about the test scores earlier, I think it's a flawed metric. What I would propose doing instead, and I would take it to our educators, and I would really push for this, I would like to see a 4-point metric of equal weight. 25% test scores, 25% administrative review, 25% peer review, because good teachers don't suffer bad teachers. My wife's a good teacher, and I know I heard about it all the time when she was teamed with somebody who didn't pull their weight. And lastly, and most importantly and most difficultly, how we get the parents involved. Right? The parental review is part of this as well, because we have to have active parent participation in the education of our children. This 4-point metric is fair, because if you have a very difficult class that doesn't test well one year, that doesn't mean you're a bad teacher. And if all your other scores come out fine, there's no worries. Conversely, if the administration has a problem with a specific individual who's a teacher, who's an outstanding teacher, all the other test scores will support that, and it won't be an issue. So it's a very fair way to assess, and the important thing that we have to do once we have the assessments is if we have teachers who are failing 3 out of 4 and 4 out of 4 of these metrics, we have to make sure we do something about it, because our children have 12 short years of primary education, and we have to make sure that one of those years isn't lost with an ineffective teacher.
Do you favor one statewide school district?
You know, consolidation is something that is going to occur throughout our state over the course of time. I believe it's going to be a natural evolvement as we go. It's not a short-term fix for our problems for a very simple reason, and that's because legally, ethically, and even organizationally, there are such significant challenges to make it happen that we have to do literally years of advanced work and renegotiations of contracts to make consolidation something that can happen. So I'm supportive of it, but I don't believe it can have a short or even a medium-term impact really on the finances of the state. Nor do I think we can do it in a certainly not a short-term time frame, and probably not likely a medium-term time frame.
Okay, and this is sort of a follow-up question to that. As opposed to a statewide district, do you favor consolidated school districts? And if so, how many should there be?
again, you know, the consolidated districts are also devilishly difficult to do. We're naturally seeing a few communities getting together and entering into joint purchasing and other types of agreements like that. Again, I think that's a natural mechanism for our local governments to go through in an attempt to figure out how they can afford to do what they need to do. I don't have a number in mind as far as the consolidated school districts. I think that that's something that we probably can't effectively dictate too much from on high. There has to be the right chemistry between the districts that we're merging and blending together. If it makes financial sense, I think the municipalities will find themselves and will begin the process of doing that.
How would you lessen Rhode Island's reliance on property taxes to fund education?
The bottom line is our property taxes are fantastically high. I mean, they're really among the highest in the country. And the executive and legislative branches of our government, to a large extent, rely on the property taxes as the tax of last resort. When we can't balance our state budgets, the governor withholds state funding to cities and towns and forces cities and towns to raise the property tax. So that's essentially the way it's been working here the last few years. I think that that's a mistake, and I think that it's a unfair burden that our state government puts down on our cities and towns. As governor, I would be supportive of a constitutional property tax cap, and more importantly, a constitutionally mandated share of a dictated share of state revenues to cities and towns. So, because we can't disrupt everybody else's budget because the state's budget is bad. I laid out for you really quickly what I would do to balance the state budget earlier. Ultimately, with our education funding formula, with fixed state aid to cities and towns, and ultimately the resurrection of our economy, which is a different topic that's probably not so appropriate for today's conversation. I have a whole set of plans for how we revive our economy. The bottom line is we need more taxpayers paying into the system, not fewer as we contract and shrink right now. So a mix of these policies and plans that I've just discussed is the way that we answer that question for you.
Would you, if elected, support or introduce Would you, if elected, support or introduce legislation limiting the scope of collective bargaining to salaries, benefits, and conditions of work?
Yes.
Okay. If elected, would you make any changes to the Board of Regents, and would you consider appointing a school committee member to the board?
I don't know all the members of the Board of Regents at this point in time, so I couldn't speak to any personnel changes, yes or no. I don't have any particular beefs with what's gone on so far at this point in time, so I don't have any immediate plans to make changes like that. I do believe that it makes sense to have a school board member represented on the board. It brings some local knowledge and a perspective that may be missing from the board right now if they don't have someone like that, so I do think that would be an appropriate addition.